Hello, hi everyone. On this lesson, we're gonna look at bacteria because on the two previous lessons, we looked at viruses, part 1 and part 2. Hope you watched that lesson because this lesson is going to cover on top of the things that we learned in the previous lesson. Okay, so remember on part 2 when I ended my lesson, I told you that on this lesson we're gonna look at the bacteria, fungi, and its relationship with bacteria. Okay, so before I start telling you about the terminology of bacteria and all these things, let's try and just draw the basic structure of a bacteria. Okay, so bacteria look something like this. They have different types of shapes. I'll talk more about those things in later on in this lesson. Okay, so bacteria have a membrane, cell membrane, cell mem running out of space, a Okay, so they also have a cell wall. This is the part that I wanted to highlight in this lesson. The cell wall. Although this is a bad drawing of a bacteria, I hope it can do justice in trying to explain to you what happens in these cells. Okay, so we spoke about the bacteria fungus as having pins at the bottom of it. Let's just try and draw the legs. Right here, we said that it has pins. Okay, so the purpose of this pin, since a bacteria has a cell wall, the pins help the virus in order for it to pierce through the cell wall. Okay, so let's say that it somehow, some way reached a bacteria. What it would do is to squat. Yes, it will squat. Okay, something like that. The collar and the sheath. Okay, so when it arrives here, it will squat. And after squatting, we spoke about the pins. The pins will pierce through the membrane, through the cell wall. And after that happens, the viral nucleic acid that we spoke about in earlier lessons will go into the bacteria. And remember this. And remember one thing. Sorry about that. Let me just redraw the cell wall. Okay, there we go. Okay, so and remember that DNA contains all the information that there is in order for the whole cell to be able to make new viruses and all those things. Okay, so after entering the bacteria, what will happen is that we have two processes of reproduction. We have the lytic and we have the lysogenic. In the lysogenic, I remember it as the long word, so therefore it is a long process. In the lysogenic, we have these proteins called reverse transcriptase proteins, and these reverse transcriptase proteins will convert this RNA from the virus into DNA. So we'll add another strand right here, and a protein will come up to this DNA, this new DNA that was made, transported towards the nucleoid. Remember, we do not have a nucleus in bacteria. That's what I wanted to cover for these. That's the lytic cycle. And after that, as the DNA gets replicated, the viral DNA as well will get replicated. Reproduction of the bacteria happen, converting the viral DNA to other bacteria and all these things. And when this viral DNA is activated, it will start entering what we call the lytic cycle. Okay, so during the lytic cycle, what happens is that the virus or the ribosomes starts making proteins, and these proteins will combine and form a virus. The virus will then leave the cell into the outside, infect another bacteria, and so on and so forth. It's just a continuous cycle. Okay, so that's enough about that. That's all examinations. Before you go to your examinations, you need to know these things. Okay, so now let's look at bacteria. Okay, so bacteria are considered as living. Why are they considered as living? That's because they have mobility. How do they gain mobility in the first place? Well, they have this tail-like structure which is called a flagella. Okay, so the flagella allows the bacteria to have mobility in order for it to move around, and it also has these hair-like structures called pili. These all help the virus to be able to move around. But obviously, where there's movement, there is energy. Energy is required for all organisms to gain mobility, which means that bacteria, still in the virus zone, bacteria have these ribosomes. Okay, so these ribosomes code for proteins. These proteins will then leave the bacteria. I don't know what they'll do outside. I'll try and make lessons about what they do outside. And after doing whatever they do outside, they'll return inside the bacteria. And as they return, ATP is formed, they're able to move around. Okay, so bacteria have a special type of group. So they have their own group, unlike the other three that we're going to look at. They are called prokaryotic. Tongue twister. Prokaryotic. Okay, so run out of space. You might need to research more about this. Okay, so what does the word prokaryotic mean? Well, we have this word pro meaning before. And we have this word karyotic, which means nucleus. Okay, so that's weird. It came before nucleus. Sounds a bit complex. What you need to know is that the word prokaryotic means that the organism does not have any nuclear bounded organelles. So the bacteria does not have any nuclear bounded organelles. Okay, so pause and try to name organelles that you know of that have a that are nuclear bounded. Okay, so the first one that we can think of is the mitochondria. Okay, so I just said that any organism that moves requires energy. So how come bacteria are able to gain energy? As I said, they release proteins into the outside. The proteins return to the bacteria, and as they return with ATP, energy, so that they can move around. Bacteria are able to grow, they're able to reproduce, they're able to respire, they're able to do all the characteristics that we spoke about. But bacteria have something special. They have something that no other organism has. Okay, so I like telling my students that bacteria are one of the least selfish microorganisms. Okay, so why am I saying they are the least selfish? Let me just erase in this part so that I can have space for the nucleic acid. Okay, so they have this region in the middle. Obviously, this region, the RNA or DNA, the nucleic acid, RNA, or DNA, is found in this region called the nucleoid, which is a region where the nucleic acid is found. Okay, so just because they have nucleic acid, it doesn't mean that they're not selfish. What am I talking about? Well, they have something more special than this. I'll make it in red to show how special it is. They have this circular DNA. Okay, so why is this circular DNA so important? Well, this circular DNA is very important because it is able to be shared from one type of bacteria to another, so that all bacteria can be able to survive conditions. Let's say that we had another bacteria in this region. Okay, so we have two bacteria. Let's say this one isn't able to survive in high temperatures, and your body just increases temperature when you're sick, right? So as your body increases temperature, let's say that this one isn't able to survive in high temperatures. What will happen is that when these two meet, this one will send molecules towards this one, telling it that it's dying. It isn't able to survive in these conditions. And what will happen is what in biology we call a horizontal gene transfer. What will happen is these pili on them will combine, and as they combine, they make this region in the middle which allows this DNA to go into here. Okay, so if this DNA is leaving this bacteria and going to this one, wouldn't that result in this one not being able to survive the extreme temperatures? Well, difficult question, but that's kind of simple, because this bacteria will replicate this plasmid, and the replicated plasmid is the one that's going to leave, and this bacteria will now be able to survive harsh temperatures. And that's why I'm saying that bacteria are the least selfish organism. Would you actually do this, share your DNA in order for someone else to survive, knowing that that could put you in high trouble with some people? Okay, so that's something you need to think about. Kind of basic philosophy of life, Ubuntu, right? Okay, so I think we're out of time. We're going to look at part 2, where I'm going to talk about endospores and things that we didn't cover, such as the shapes of bacteria such as Coccus, Vibrio, Bacilli, and Spirally. Okay, so thank you for watching this lesson, and goodbye.